Get your black ass out of my seat, boy. Patricia Whitfield's manicured nails dug into Alexander Reynolds' shoulder as she yanked him upward. His coffee spilled across the Wall Street Journal, hot liquid splashing his jeans. She shoved him into the aisle and dropped into seat 1A like conquering territory. That's better. Patricia smoothed her Chanel skirt, claiming his armrest. Some people forget where they belong. Alexander stood hunched under the low cabin ceiling. His plain hoodie and faded jeans screamed economy class. Her diamond bracelet caught first-class lighting as she adjusted herself in his warm leather seat. Phones lifted around them. A teenager went live on TikTok. 200 passengers watched a theft in real time. Alexander gripped his boarding pass. The ink 1A was smudged but visible. Have you ever watched evil win while everyone just stood there? Justice was coming. Flight doors closing in 10 minutes. All passengers must be seated. Alexander's fingers instinctively reached for the small silver airplane pendant hanging beneath his hoodie. A gift from his father 30 years ago when they'd watch planes take off from their apartment near the airport. Remember, son, no matter how high those planes fly, someone still has to clean them, his father had said, returning home in his janitor's uniform. But someday you might be the one flying them. Today, Alexander wasn't just flying. He owned the skies. But Patricia didn't know that. Nobody did. Not yet. The morning had started routinely enough. Alexander had deliberately dressed down as he often did for his unannounced flight evaluations. The casual clothing was strategic. He wanted to experience Sky Global as an ordinary customer, not as its chief executive. The hoodie and jeans had been his uniform throughout the early days of building the airline from nothing. Even now, with billions in assets, he felt most authentic in these clothes. As he waited to board, Alexander had questioned whether these undercover assessments were still necessary. Perhaps he was being overly vigilant. The company had policies in place after all. But something kept nagging at him. Reports from minority passengers that didn't align with the glowing reviews from others. The only way to know for sure was to see for himself. Patricia removed her designer sunglasses, eyeing him with undisguised contempt. You can stand there all day. That seat is mine now. Alexander noted her platinum frequent flyer tag on her carry-on. She wore power and privilege like armor, weaponizing it against anyone she deemed beneath her. He'd seen her type before. People who confused money with character status with humanity. Ma'am, I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Alexander said, voice level and controlled. This is my assigned seat. It's clearly not. She snapped, pulling out her boarding pass with an exaggerated gesture. C1A, first class. My seat. Alexander glanced at her boarding pass. It indeed showed 1A. The double booking wasn't accidental. He'd been expecting it, though not quite the level of hostility that came with it. A young man in jeans across the aisle whispered to his companion, "Did you see that?" She just grabbed him. Someone should say something. His friend replied, but neither did. An elderly woman in 1B watched with wide eyes, clutching her purse tighter. A middle-aged businessman in 3C glanced up, then deliberately returned to his newspaper. Just another entitled passenger making a scene, he muttered to his seatmate. These people always want special treatment. His companion nodded in agreement. They should stick to their assigned seats. First class is first class for a reason. Alexander felt the familiar weight of being the problem simply by existing. He'd built a multi-billion-dollar company, employed thousands, revolutionized an industry. Yet here he stood, coffee dripping down his jeans while passengers watched a woman claim ownership of his body and space. His phone vibrated in his pocket. The board meeting would start without him if this situation wasn't resolved quickly. But that was precisely the point. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about accountability. Ma'am, I understand your boarding pass says 1A. Alexander tried again, but mine does as well. Perhaps we should call a flight attendant to sort this out. Oh, I'm sure they'll sort it out. Patricia said with a smirk. They know who belongs where. Alexander's pulse remained steady. 20 years of meditation and executive training had taught him to transform rage into resolve. He'd learned that lesson the hard way after losing his temper at an investor meeting early in his career. Black anger, they'd called it before rejecting his pitch. He never gave them that excuse again. Still, a voice inside him whispered, "Is this really necessary? Am I setting up my own employees for failure?" The thought troubled him. The consequences would be severe if they failed his test. Careers could be ruined. But then, how many passengers had been humiliated without consequences? How many people had endured this treatment with no recourse? A teenage girl with auburn hair, later identified as Amy Davidson, held her phone at chest height, the red recording light blinking. She whispered into her live stream, "You guys, I can't believe what I'm seeing right now." As the confrontation unfolded, Diana Rodriguez sat quietly in seat 3C, observing with practiced neutrality. As Sky Global's Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, she recognized Alexander immediately but maintained her cover. This was, after all, exactly what they had planned, though Patricia's aggression had escalated matters beyond their expectations. Diana had her own history with discrimination, having faced it repeatedly throughout her career. Born to immigrant parents who worked as hotel housekeepers, she had climbed the corporate ladder through sheer determination and brilliance. During her interview with Sky Global, she'd shared a pivotal moment being escorted out of a first-class lounge despite having the correct credentials because the staff refused to believe they were hers. The dignity protocol had been Diana's brainchild. For 2 years, she'd meticulously documented discrimination incidents, built prototype reporting systems, and developed training materials. When budget discussions threatened to derail the project, she'd personally convinced Alexander to maintain funding. Today was the culmination of those efforts, a real-world test of whether Sky Global's culture truly aligned with its stated values. Flight attendant Patricia called out sharply, snapping her fingers in the air. "We have a situation here." Alexander stood calmly, one hand still touching the hidden pendant beneath his hoodie. The metal was warm against his fingertips, grounding him as passengers stared. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others filmed openly now. The tension in the cabin thickened with each passing second. Flight attendant Jessica Martinez rushed toward the commotion, her Sky Global uniform pristinely pressed, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She spotted Patricia settled comfortably in 1A and Alexander standing awkwardly in the aisle. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about this disruption." Jessica's voice dripped sympathy as she touched Patricia's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Alexander stepped forward, boarding pass extended. "This is my assigned seat. 1A. Jessica barely glanced at the paper. Her eyes swept over his hoodie, his scuffed sneakers, his dark skin. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Economy class is toward the back of the aircraft." Finally, Patricia sighed dramatically. "Someone with common sense. Could you please look at my boarding pass?" Alexander kept his voice level. "Sir, please don't make this more difficult." Jessica positioned herself between Alexander and the seat. "I'm sure your actual seat is very comfortable." Behind them, passengers whispered. Phones emerged from pockets. Amy Davidson's TikTok live stream now had 300 viewers and climbing rapidly. "I don't understand the confusion," Alexander said quietly. "My ticket clearly shows—" "Look at him," Patricia interrupted, gesturing dismissively. "Does he look like he belongs in first class? I'm Diamond Elite status. I've been flying Sky Global for 15 years. Jessica nodded knowingly. "Of course, ma'am. We appreciate your loyalty." "I have the same loyalty program status Alexander offered. If you could just verify, sir, I don't have time for games." Jessica's tone sharpened. "Now please, find your correct seat so we can depart on time." Amy's live stream counter climbed. 500 viewers? 800? 1,200? Comments flooded the screen. This is discrimination. Why won't she look at his ticket, call the supervisor? Alexander pulled out his phone. The screen showed multiple missed calls and text messages. One read, "Board meeting moved to 4:00 p.m. "Where are you? Putting on quite a show, aren't you?" Patricia smirked, pretending to be important. Jessica noticed Alexander's expensive-looking phone but dismissed it. "Sir, final warning. Move to your assigned seat or I'll need to call security." "I am in my assigned seat," Alexander repeated calmly. "No, you're not." Jessica's voice rose. "This is first class. You're clearly in economy." The assumption hung in the air like poison. Other passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some were filming openly now. Alexander glanced at his leather briefcase in the overhead bin. His initials AR were embossed in gold. The briefcase cost more than most people's monthly rent. But Jessica's eyes never traveled upward. Tyler Wilson, the youngest member of the flight crew at just 24, hovered nearby. Something about this situation made him deeply uncomfortable. He'd only been with Sky Global for 3 months, and while he wanted to impress his seniors, this approach seemed wrong. He glimpsed Alexander's boarding pass from a distance, clearly seeing 1A printed on it. Tyler had grown up in a diverse neighborhood in Chicago and had friends from all backgrounds. His mother, a single parent who worked as a nurse, had raised him to judge people by their character, not their appearance. When he joined Sky Global, he'd been drawn to their diversity statements and inclusion policies. This incident was forcing him to confront the gap between the company's stated values and its actual practices. More than his job was at stake. Tyler was supporting his mother through a costly medical treatment. If he lost this position, they could lose everything. Still, watching this passenger being humiliated felt like a betrayal of everything his mother had taught him. "Ma'am," an elderly passenger called out. "Maybe you should check his ticket." "Thank you, but I can handle this," Jessica snapped back. Patricia examined her manicured nails. "I can't believe this is even a discussion. Look at us. Look at him. It's obvious who belongs where." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His breathing remained steady, controlled. Years of meditation and executive training kept his composure intact. 8 minutes to departure. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Cabin crew prepare for departure." Jessica turned to Patricia. "Ma'am, I apologize for this delay. We'll have this resolved immediately." She pressed the call button for the purser. "Michael, I need assistance in first class. We have a passenger in the wrong seat who won't comply." Alexander watched the interaction with clinical interest. Every word, every gesture was being recorded by multiple devices. The documentation was perfect. Amy's stream had reached 3,000 viewers. Her whispered commentary captured everything the flight attendant won't even look at his boarding pass. "This is insane. I've seen this before," Patricia announced to nearby passengers. "They get one credit card, buy one expensive item, and think they can fool everyone." She gestured at Alexander's clothes. "Designer hoodie, please. Probably bought at an outlet mall." A woman in 2B nodded enthusiastically. "Happens all the time. They see how the other half lives and think they deserve it too." A few passengers looked uncomfortable at the exchange, but many others nodded in agreement. The social dynamics of the cabin were clarifying. Far more people sided with Patricia than Alexander had expected. Alexander said nothing. His silence seemed to irritate Patricia more than arguments would have. "At least say something," she taunted. "Defend yourself, unless you know you're wrong." The purser's footsteps approached from behind. Michael Carter, 8-year Sky Global veteran, carried himself with practiced authority. His eyes immediately assessed the situation. Well-dressed white woman in first class, casually dressed black man standing in the aisle. The math was simple in his mind. "What seems to be the problem here?" Michael's voice carried the weight of policy and procedure. This passenger, Jessica emphasized the word like an accusation, refuses to move to his assigned seat. He's disrupting our departure schedule. Michael didn't ask to see Alexander's ticket, didn't ask for his name or confirmation number. His assumption was instant and complete. "Sir, you need to find your correct seat immediately. We have a schedule to maintain." Alexander extended his boarding pass again. "I am in my correct seat. This is my documentation." Michael barely glanced at the paper. "Sir, I don't have time for fake documents or games. Move to economy now, or I'll call airport security." The threat landed like a slap. Several passengers gasped. Amy's viewer count jumped to 5,000. Alexander looked around the cabin. Every face told the same story. They saw his skin color his clothes and made their judgment. The boarding pass in his hand might as well have been invisible. 6 minutes to departure came another announcement. "Perfect," Patricia said, settling deeper into the seat. "I have a connecting flight in New York. I can't afford delays because of this nonsense." Alexander nodded slowly as if coming to a decision. He pulled out his phone and opened an app. The loading screen showed a Sky Global Airlines logo. "This isn't just about today," he thought. "This is about everyone who's ever been in this situation without the power to change it." Still, the magnitude of what was about to happen weighed on him. Michael had a family. Jessica would lose income. Did the punishment fit the crime? Would ruining careers truly create meaningful change? "What's he doing now?" Jessica muttered to Michael. "Probably calling someone to complain." Michael replied dismissively. "They always do." Alexander's thumb moved across the screen, navigating through menus with practiced efficiency. His expression remained calm, almost serene. The storm was about to break. "We have a code yellow in first class." Michael spoke into his radio, requesting additional crew support. Within seconds, 2 more flight attendants appeared. Tyler Wilson, 24, fresh-faced and eager to impress, and Rachel Thompson, 40, a veteran with tired eyes and zero patience for disruptions. "What's the situation?" Rachel asked, crossing her arms as she looked Alexander up and down. "The passenger refuses to move to economy," Jessica explained. "Won't accept that he's in the wrong seat." Tyler positioned himself behind Alexander, blocking any retreat. "Sir, we really need you to cooperate here." As the words left his mouth, Tyler felt a wave of shame wash over him. This wasn't who he was or how he'd been raised. He was going along with something that felt fundamentally wrong simply because he was afraid to be the one who questioned authority. The realization made him feel physically ill. 4 crew members now formed a semicircle around Alexander in the narrow aisle. Patricia watched from her stolen throne, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. "This is embarrassing," she announced loudly. "I'm trying to get to an important business meeting, and this man is holding up the entire flight with his delusions." Alexander remained calm, his phone still in his hand. The Sky Global app was open, but the screen wasn't visible to the crew. 5 minutes to departure. The captain's voice cut through the tension. "Crew, please prepare for pushback." "You hear that?" Michael's voice hardened. "You're delaying 200 passengers because you can't accept reality." "Yeah," Tyler added, emboldened by the group dynamic. "Just take your real seat and we can all move on." Rachel stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Listen carefully. Move to economy now, or airport security will remove you in handcuffs. Your choice." The threat of handcuffs sent a ripple through the cabin. More phones appeared. Amy's TikTok stream had exploded to 15,000 viewers. Comments flying faster than she could read them. "Call the police. This is 2025. Sue them all. #Sky Global Racism." Patricia basked in the attention. "I've never seen such entitled behavior. Some people think the rules don't apply to them." She turned to address the filming passengers. "You're all witnesses to this disruption. I tried to handle this quietly, but he just won't listen to reason." A businessman in seat 2C lowered his laptop. This was Samuel Walker, CEO of Walker Technologies. "Excuse me, but shouldn't you at least look at his boarding pass before, sir?" "Please don't interfere." Michael cut him off sharply. "We're handling this professionally." "Professionally?" Samuel's eyebrows rose. "You haven't even verified his ticket." Rachel whirled around. "Are you questioning our procedures?" "I'm questioning why you won't look at a piece of paper," Samuel replied evenly. Jessica's face flushed. "We don't need to examine obvious forgeries. How do you know it's forged if you haven't looked?" asked the elderly woman in 1B. The crew was losing control of the narrative. Passengers were turning against them, and the phones kept recording. "Look at him." Patricia stood up from the seat, gesturing wildly. "Use your eyes. Does anything about this man scream first-class passenger to you?" She pointed at Alexander's hoodie. "That's a $30 sweatshirt from Target. I can tell the quality when I see it." Alexander glanced down at his clothing, then back at Patricia with mild curiosity. "How can you determine the price of my clothes?" "Because I know cheap when I see it," Patricia snapped. "Your shoes are probably from Payless. Your jeans look like they came from Walmart." "Ma'am is absolutely right." Tyler nodded eagerly. "First-class passengers have certain presentation standards." Rachel crossed her arms. "We're trained to identify passengers who might be out of place. It's about maintaining the premium experience for legitimate customers." Alexander's phone buzzed with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, emails marked urgent. One message preview was visible. Board meeting moved to 4:00 p.m., where Patricia spotted it and laughed. "Oh, look, he's got someone texting him about a board meeting. How cute. Probably his supervisor at McDonald's." Several passengers shifted uncomfortably at the cruelty, but the crew seemed energized by Patricia's confidence. Sir Michael's patience had evaporated. "This is your final warning. Security is already on their way up the jet bridge." "Actually," Alexander said quietly, "I'd like them to see this." His calm response seemed to unnerve the crew. They'd expected anger arguments, threats of lawsuits. Instead, he stood there like he was collecting evidence. "See what Jessica snapped? You making a fool of yourself, him proving he doesn't belong here?" Patricia added with a laugh. "Look at him. Really look. Does anything about this man say first class to you?" She gestured dramatically at his appearance. "The shoes alone tell the whole story." "Those aren't first-class shoes," a teenage passenger whispered loudly. "This is so messed up. They're being totally racist." Tyler spun around. "Excuse me. We're following standard protocols here. This has nothing to do with race." "Then why won't you look at his ticket?" The teenager shot back. "Because we can tell when someone's lying," Rachel replied coldly. "It's called experience." Alexander glanced down at his comfortable walking shoes, then back at Patricia. Still no anger in his expression. If anything, he looked satisfied. "Ma'am has a point," Rachel said. "First-class passengers dress appropriately. They understand the environment they're entering." "Exactly." Tyler nodded eagerly. "It's about respect. Respect for the airline. Respect for other passengers. Respect for the premium experience." Amy whispered to her live stream. "This is the most racist thing I've ever seen in person. They won't even look at his ticket." Her viewer count hit 25,000. The hashtag #SkyGlobalDiscrimination was starting to trend on Twitter. Michael keyed his radio again. "Security, what's your ETA to gate A12? 2 minutes out came the crackling response. "Perfect." Patricia clapped her hands together. Finally, some professional handling of this situation. She looked directly at Alexander. "I hope you're happy with yourself. Now everyone on this plane knows exactly what kind of person you are." Alexander tilted his head slightly. "What kind of person am I?" The question caught Patricia off guard. She'd expected denial, not curiosity. "You're the kind who lies," she said, regaining her composure. "Who tries to take what isn't yours. Who thinks you can fool people with fake documents and sob stories." I haven't told any stories, Alexander observed quietly. Your whole presence here is a story Patricia shot back. A fantasy where you belong in first class. Well, reality is about to knock. The crew nodded in agreement. They'd created a unified narrative Alexander was a fraud. They were the heroes maintaining order. Heavy footsteps echoed from the jet bridge. 2 airport security officers appeared at the aircraft door, their radios crackling with status updates. There he is, Jessica pointed at Alexander like identifying a criminal. The passenger causing the disruption. Officer Jackson, a black man in his 40s, approached with his partner Officer Rivera, a Hispanic woman with kind eyes but firm demeanor. What seems to be the problem here? Officer Jackson asked professionally. Michael launched into his prepared explanation. The passenger refuses to move to his assigned seat. Claims this first-class seat belongs to him despite obvious evidence to the contrary. What obvious evidence? Officer Rivera asked. The crew exchanged glances. They'd been so confident in their assumptions they hadn't considered someone might ask for actual proof. Well, Jessica stammered. I mean, look at him. Officer Jackson's expression hardened slightly. Ma'am, I need specific evidence, not observations about appearance. Patricia sensed the crew's hesitation and jumped in. Officers, I've been patient, but this man has been harassing me for 10 minutes. I just want to sit in the seat I paid for. Ma'am, we understand, Officer Rivera replied. Then to Alexander. Sir, your boarding pass, please. Alexander handed over the crumpled paper. Officer Rivera examined it carefully, her brow furrowing as she read. The aircraft had gone almost silent except for the hum of electronics and whispered commentary from filming passengers. Officer Rivera looked at the boarding pass again, then at Alexander, then at Patricia, sitting in 1A. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to confusion. This boarding pass says Seat 1A, she said slowly. Michael stepped forward desperately. Obviously forged. Look at him. Does he look like he can afford first class? That's not how we determine. Officer Rivera began, but Patricia cut her off. Please, officer. Use common sense here. I'm a Diamond Elite member. I've been loyal to Sky Global for 15 years. Why would I lie about my seat? She pulled out her phone, showing her Sky Global app. Look, here's my boarding pass. Seat 1A, first class. Officer Jackson examined Patricia's phone, then looked back at Alexander's paper boarding pass. The situation was becoming more complex than a simple seating dispute. Sir Officer Jackson addressed Alexander. Can you show us some ID and explain how you obtained this boarding pass? Alexander reached slowly into his pocket, his movements deliberate and calm. The entire cabin watched as he withdrew his wallet, but instead of pulling out a driver's license, his fingers moved to a different pocket to his phone. Actually, Alexander said, his voice carrying a new quality. Quiet authority that made everyone lean in. I think there's something you all need to see first. The app on his phone had finished loading. The storm was about to break. Alexander's thumb moved across his phone screen with practiced precision. The Sky Global Airlines app interface shifted, revealing layers most passengers never saw. Executive dashboard, CEO portal, employee management system. The screen filled with corporate data authorization codes and a header that made Officer Rivera's breath catch in her throat. Alexander Reynolds, Chief Executive Officer. Authority level supreme. All access. Employee ID. 00001. Founder. CEO. Direct reports. 37,000 employees. Officer Jackson leaned over his partner's shoulder to see the screen. His professional composure cracked for just a moment. Sir, he whispered. The change in the security officer's demeanor was immediate and unmistakable. They stepped back slightly, their entire posture shifting from enforcement to deference. Michael noticed the officer's reaction first. What? What are you looking at? Alexander held the phone screen toward the purser. Michael's eyes moved across the display, processing each word. His face went from confident authority to confusion to dawning horror in the span of 3 seconds. That can't be. Michael's clipboard slipped from his fingers, clattering to the floor. Jessica leaned in to see what had shocked her supervisor into silence. When the information registered, her face drained of all color. "Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God." Tyler and Rachel crowded closer, squinting at the screen. The corporate hierarchy was crystal clear. Every person on this aircraft, from the captain to the newest flight attendant, reported ultimately to the man they'd been humiliating for the past 10 minutes. Mr. Reynolds, Officer Jackson, said quietly, his voice carrying new respect. We weren't aware of your position." Alexander looked at the security officer with calm eyes. "Of course you weren't. That was entirely the point." The cabin had gone dead silent, except for the hum of electronics and the soft sound of phones recording. Every passenger sensed the dramatic shift in power, though most couldn't see the phone screen. Patricia, still seated in 1A, looked around in confusion. "What's everyone staring at? Can we please resolve this and take off?" Alexander turned the phone screen toward her. Patricia's eyes scanned the display, her expression cycling through disbelief, recognition, and pure terror. You can't be," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "I own 67% of this airline, Ms. Whitfield." Alexander's voice remained calm, but it now carried unmistakable authority. "I don't just own Seat 1A. I own every seat on this aircraft." The words hit Patricia like a physical blow. She gripped the armrests of the seat, his seat. As the full magnitude of her situation became clear, Michael found his voice, though it trembled. "Sir, we had no idea." "We were just following standard," what Alexander interrupted gently. "Standard procedure is to examine passenger documentation before making assumptions. Standard procedure is to treat every customer with dignity and respect." He looked at each crew member in turn. "Instead, you made judgments based on my appearance. You refused to look at my boarding pass. You threatened me with arrest." Jessica's hands were shaking. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm so sorry. We made a terrible mistake." "You made several terrible mistakes," Alexander corrected. "But the biggest one was assuming that respect is earned by appearance rather than humanity." Amy's live stream had exploded to 89,000 viewers. The comment section was moving too fast to read, but the sentiment was clear. Justice was finally coming. Alexander checked his watch, not for departure time, but for something else entirely. His calendar showed a reminder that made several passengers gasp when they glimpsed it. Emergency Board Meeting Discrimination Protocol Review, 4:00 p.m. Legal Department Federal Compliance Violation Report, 4:15 p.m. Media Relations Press Conference Prep, 5:00 p.m. Current time 3:47 p.m. Officer Rivera realized what she was seeing. "Sir, this was planned." Alexander nodded slowly. "I've been conducting unannounced assessments of our passenger experience protocols. Today's test revealed structural failures at multiple levels." Suddenly, a passenger from the back of the cabin stood up. "This is absurd," he shouted. "A CEO setting up his own employees to fail. What kind of leadership is that?" Alexander turned to face the new challenger, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit. The kind of passenger who would never experience the treatment Alexander had just endured. Employees failed when they chose assumptions over evidence, Alexander replied evenly. When they ignored policy in favor of prejudice. "I didn't create this situation. I merely experienced what countless passengers face daily." "You're deliberately dressed to provoke this reaction," the man argued. "This is entrapment, plain and simple." Several passengers murmured in agreement. The cabin was dividing into factions, those horrified by the discrimination they'd witnessed and those uncomfortable with the public reckoning now unfolding. "Is it entrapment to expect employees to follow basic verification procedures?" Alexander asked. "To treat all passengers with dignity regardless of appearance?" The man had no ready answer to that, but the confrontation had complicated the narrative. This wasn't a simple story of right and wrong, but a complex question of accountability and fairness. Alexander turned back to the crew. "The question isn't whether I set you up to fail. The question is why you failed so spectacularly at the most basic aspects of your job." The crew stood frozen, understanding that they'd walked into a carefully orchestrated evaluation and failed spectacularly. Patricia tried to stand from the seat, but her legs were unsteady. "I didn't know. I had no idea." "Would it have mattered?" Alexander asked quietly. "If I were just Alexander Reynolds' passenger instead of Alexander Reynolds' CEO, would that justify your behavior?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. Patricia had no answer because they both knew the truth. Ms. Whitfield Alexander continued. "You're currently sitting in seat 1A, which is reserved exclusively for the chief executive officer when traveling. You've been occupying the CEO's personal seat." Patricia looked down at the leather seat as if it had suddenly become molten. Everything about her situation, her assumptions, her cruelty, her public humiliation of this man, crashed down on her at once. Michael desperately tried to salvage his career. "Sir, if we could speak privately, I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Alexander replied. "You and your crew discriminated against a passenger based on race and perceived social class. That discrimination happened to target your own chief executive officer." He gestured to the cameras still recording. "But more importantly, it was captured by dozens of witnesses and broadcast live to nearly 100,000 viewers." Rachel found her voice. "Mr. Reynolds, please, we can fix this. We can make this right." Alexander looked at her with something that might have been pity. "Ms. Thompson, you threatened to have me removed in handcuffs for sitting in my own seat. How exactly do you propose to make this right?" The crew had no answer. They'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed, made assumptions that revealed their deepest biases, and done it all while being recorded. Officer Jackson cleared his throat. "Sir, what would you like us to do about this situation?" Alexander considered the question. Around him, 200 passengers waited to see how power would be wielded when the tables turned. Was he being too harsh? The thought flashed through his mind. Michael had a family to support. Jessica would face financial hardship. Were their actions truly unforgivable or merely human failings that deserved a second chance? Then he remembered all those who had faced this treatment without any recourse. The countless passengers humiliated with no cameras recording, no CEO authority to invoke, no justice available. "Officer Jackson, I'd like you and Officer Rivera to witness what happens next. The documentation will be important for the federal investigation." Federal investigation. The words sent a chill through everyone who heard them. Alexander opened his phone again, this time to the contacts list. The screen showed names that made the crew's remaining hope evaporate. Legal Department, Direct Line Human Resources, Emergency Protocol Media Relations, Crisis Management Board Chair, Immediate Response. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander announced to the cabin, his voice carrying the authority of ownership, "I apologize for this delay. What you've witnessed today is exactly why structural change is necessary in corporate America." He looked at Patricia, still frozen in his seat. "Ms. Whitfield, you have approximately 30 seconds to return to your actual assigned seat before I make the first of several phone calls." Patricia's expensive composure cracked completely. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Alexander said quietly. "The question now is what happens next. The entire cabin held its breath as justice prepared to be served. Alexander pressed the first number on his phone. The call connected immediately, broadcasting on speaker for the entire cabin to hear. Alexander Reynolds' office legal department. This is Victoria Hendricks. Victoria, this is Alexander. I'm currently on flight 447 and I need you to prepare immediate documentation for a federal discrimination case. The lawyer's voice sharpened with concern. Sir, what's the situation? I've just been discriminated against by 4 of our own crew members and a passenger. The incident was captured on multiple devices and is currently being live-streamed to over 100,000 viewers. Victoria's silence lasted 3 seconds, an eternity in legal terms. Sir, I'll have a full legal team standing by within the hour. Are you injured? Not physically, but our company's reputation and federal compliance status are in serious jeopardy. Alexander looked directly at Michael while speaking. Employee number 47291 just threatened to have me arrested for sitting in my assigned seat. I'll need his complete employment file and termination papers prepared immediately. Michael's face went ashen. Employee number 47291. Alexander knew his employee ID from memory. Mr. Reynolds, Michael whispered desperately, please, I have a family. I have a mortgage. My wife is pregnant with our second child. I was just following what I thought was protocol. The mention of Michael's family gave Alexander pause. The man's entire livelihood hung in the balance. Would his punishment truly serve justice or merely create another victim? But then what message would leniency send about the seriousness of discrimination? Protocol. Alexander's voice remained calm but carried steel. Show me the protocol that says crew members should refuse to examine passenger boarding passes based on skin color. Michael had no answer because no such protocol existed. Victoria Alexander continued into the phone. I also need comprehensive documentation on our current anti-discrimination policies. Clearly they're failing if our crew can't distinguish between legitimate security concerns and racial profiling. Should I contact the Federal Aviation Administration? Victoria asked. Yes, and the Department of Transportation's Office of Civil Rights. They'll want to review our compliance immediately. The legal implications were mounting by the second. Federal agencies meant investigations, fines, and potential operational restrictions. Also, prepare civil rights violation documentation under Title II of the Civil Rights Act, both individual and institutional liability. Alexander ended the call and immediately dialed the second number, Human Resources. Alexander Reynolds' office, HR emergency line. This is Director Janet Mills. Janet, this is Alexander. I need immediate employment actions for Flight 447 crew members. The cabin was dead silent except for the sound of phones recording and the soft crying from several crew members. Jessica Martinez, employee 23847. Full investigation into discrimination violations. 6-month unpaid suspension pending mandatory bias training completion. She must pass a psychological evaluation before reinstatement consideration. Jessica's knees buckled. 6 months without pay would mean losing her apartment, possibly her car. Tyler Wilson, employee 19293. 1-year probation with mandatory weekly counseling sessions. Diversity training certification required monthly. Any future incident results in immediate termination. Tyler nodded frantically, grateful to still have employment. His mind raced. His mother's medical treatments cost $2,000 a month. At least he still had his job, but probation meant no advancement, no raises. They would barely scrape by. Rachel Thompson, employee 31456. Mandatory 100-hour bias training program, professional counseling evaluation, and demotion from senior flight attendant. Salary reduction of 15% for 2 years. Rachel's face crumpled. 15 years of career advancement wiped out by 10 minutes of prejudice. And Michael Carter, employee 47291. Alexander's voice carried finality. Immediate termination with cause. 0 severance, Forfeiture of all benefits including pension contributions and permanent notation preventing rehire anywhere in the aviation industry. Michael collapsed completely sobbing in the aircraft aisle. Please, Mr. Reynolds, please don't destroy my life. I made a mistake, but I can learn. I can change. My wife doesn't work. She stays home with our son. We have another baby coming. Please. The naked desperation in Michael's voice made several passengers uncomfortable. The public humiliation had shifted from satisfying justice to something that felt excessive. Whispers circulated through the cabin about the punishment being too severe. Alexander felt the weight of the moment. Michael's fate rested entirely in his hands. Was permanent career destruction truly justified for a single incident? The question troubled him deeply. But discrimination wasn't a momentary lapse. It was the manifestation of deep-seated patterns reinforced over years and enacted through countless small decisions. Mr. Carter, you had 8 years to learn. Alexander said, his voice softer but no less resolute. 8 years of mandatory bias training, diversity workshops, and customer service protocols. Instead, you chose to threaten your own CEO with arrest based on assumptions about my race and social class. He turned back to the phone. Janet, implement immediate policy changes. Body camera requirements for all crew members effective tomorrow morning. Any passenger complaint involving potential discrimination must be recorded and reviewed by a bias response team within 24 hours. Budget allocation for the new program, Sir, $75 million annually for the first 3 years. This structural failure ends today. The number sent shockwaves through the listening passengers. $75 million. More money than many small companies saw in their entire existence, dedicated solely to preventing discrimination. Also establish a passenger advocate position in every hub, independent oversight with direct reporting to my office, and create an anonymous bias reporting system with real-time alerts to management. Sir, the operational changes will be significant. Our existing technology infrastructure can't support body cameras for 15,000 customer-facing staff. The bandwidth requirements alone. The operational cost of discrimination is higher. Alexander interrupted. We'll also be implementing quarterly bias assessments for all customer-facing employees. Failure means immediate retraining or termination. Alexander ended the HR call and turned his attention to Patricia, who was still sitting in his seat like she'd been turned to stone. Ms. Whitfield, now we discuss your situation. He pulled up her LinkedIn profile on his phone, turning the screen toward the recording cameras, so Amy's 150,000 live stream viewers could see it clearly. Patricia Whitfield, Senior Marketing Director at Vital Brands Corporation, Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Committee, Chairwoman, recent LinkedIn post, and I quote, "Zero tolerance for workplace discrimination. We must all do better." The hypocrisy was so stark it was almost surreal. A woman who publicly championed inclusion had just committed one of the most blatant acts of racial discrimination many passengers had ever witnessed. Ms. Whitfield, you publicly advocate for diversity while privately telling black men to get their black ass to the back of the plane. Your employer will find this interesting. Patricia's carefully constructed professional facade was disintegrating in real time. Please, I didn't mean. I'm not usually like this. I was frustrated about a delayed connection. I would never normally. You meant every word, Alexander said quietly. The question is what happens next. He pulled up his contacts again, showing her a name, Vital Brands Executive Relations, direct line. I can make one phone call and end your career today. Your company has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, don't they? Patricia nodded miserably. Or, Alexander continued, you can choose accountability over denial. You have 2 options. The entire cabin leaned forward. Justice was about to be precisely measured. Option 1. Alexander said, his voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin. You record a public apology that will be shared across all social media platforms. You complete 200 hours of community service specifically at civil rights organizations. You undergo 6 months of professional bias counseling. You accept lifetime monitoring status on all flights, meaning every interaction you have with airline staff will be documented. Patricia's mouth opened wordlessly. Additionally, you'll speak at diversity training sessions for corporate executives, sharing exactly what you did and why it was wrong. Your story will become a case study in unconscious bias training. The requirements were comprehensive and humiliating, but not career-ending. Option 2. I file federal discrimination charges under Title II of the Civil Rights Act. You face up to $500,000 in civil penalties under Georgia's hate crime enhancement laws. You receive a lifetime ban from Sky Global and all partner airlines, American, United Southwest, JetBlue, and I personally call your CEO to provide video evidence of today's incident. The second option was professional suicide and financial ruin. Alexander dialed his third number. Media Relations. Alexander Reynolds' Office, Crisis Communications. This is Director Michael Bennett. Michael, this is Alexander. We have a major incident requiring immediate response. I was racially discriminated against by our own crew and a passenger on Flight 447. The incident is viral on social media. Sir, how viral are we talking about? Amy held up her phone showing the viewer counter climbing in real time. 189,000, 195,000, 203,000 people watching live. Currently over 200,000 people watching live across multiple platforms. The hashtag Sky Global Discrimination is trending #1 on Twitter. I need a full press conference set up for 6 p.m. today. Complete transparency protocol. Sir, the stock price implications could be severe. Maybe we should consider damage control messaging first. Alexander's voice carried absolute authority. We're not controlling damage. We're owning our mistakes completely and demonstrating exactly how we're fixing them. Transparency builds trust. Cover-ups destroy companies. The media director's voice was strained. Sir, the board might want to discuss strategic messaging options. I am the board. 67% majority shareholder. This is my decision, and it's final. Alexander looked directly into Amy's phone camera, addressing the live stream audience directly. Ladies and gentlemen watching this stream, what you've witnessed today is exactly why structural change is necessary in corporate America. This wasn't just about one seat on one flight. This was about the assumptions, biases, and casual cruelty that marginalized people face every single day. He gestured to the crew and Patricia. These people made judgments based on my skin color and clothing. They refused to examine evidence. They threatened me with arrest, and they did it confidently because they thought there would be no consequences. The live stream comments were flying too fast to read, but the overwhelming sentiment was clear. Justice was finally being served. Alexander turned back to Patricia. Ms. Whitfield, the 200,000 people watching this stream are waiting for your decision. Do you choose accountability and reform or legal consequences and career destruction? Patricia looked around the cabin desperately. 200 faces stared back at her, most showing no sympathy whatsoever. She'd earned their judgment with racist assumptions and public cruelty. I choose option 1, she whispered. The live stream audience can't hear you, Alexander said firmly. Speak clearly, so your choice is properly documented. I choose option 1, Patricia said loudly, tears streaming down her face. I choose to apologize publicly and complete the community service and counseling. Alexander nodded to Officer Jackson. Officer, please document that Ms. Whitfield has selected accountability over denial. Her public apology will be recorded and distributed across all social media platforms. He turned to the devastated crew members. As for you four, your employment fates have been determined based on your individual actions and leadership roles in this discrimination. Michael was still collapsed on the floor, understanding that 8 years of career advancement had been destroyed by 10 minutes of biased assumptions. The structural changes I'm implementing today will ensure this never happens again on any Sky Global aircraft. I guarantee it." The cabin erupted in applause. Justice had been served thoroughly and publicly. The real work was just beginning. Alexander's mind drifted briefly to his childhood. Growing up in the South Bronx, he'd watched his father work double shifts as an airline janitor, coming home with stories about the beautiful planes he cleaned but would never fly in. Those first-class seats, his father would say, cost more than I make in a month. When Alexander was 14, they'd saved for months to buy a standby ticket to visit his grandmother in Atlanta. At the gate, despite having a valid ticket, the agent had refused to believe it was legitimate. "These tickets aren't transferable," she'd said, not even looking at his ID. His father had stood silent, eyes down. That day, Alexander had promised himself two things: he would own an airline someday, and no one would ever feel what he felt in that moment. Now, as he stood in the aisle of his own aircraft, watching justice unfold, he felt his father's presence. The pendant beneath his hoodie seemed warmer somehow. Diana Rodriguez finally stepped forward from her seat, her Sky Global executive credentials now visible around her neck. "Mr. Reynolds, the team is standing by for your instructions regarding protocol implementation." The revelation that a second executive had been observing sent another shockwave through the cabin. This hadn't just been a chance encounter. It had been a coordinated evaluation of the airline's culture. Alexander nodded. "Thank you, Diana. Please prepare the full report for the board. I want video timestamps matched to employee actions, passenger reactions, and protocol violations." "Already in progress, sir," she replied, holding up her tablet. "The documentation is comprehensive." 20 minutes later, the aircraft had been cleared and a new crew boarded. Michael Carter walked past the windows, his face haunted. His 8-year career with Sky Global had ended in complete disgrace. Tomorrow, he would have to tell his pregnant wife they had lost everything: their income, their health insurance, their future security. All because he had failed to verify a boarding pass. Alexander watched Michael's departure with a complex mix of emotions. Was the punishment too severe? Yet how many countless passengers had suffered similar humiliation with no recourse? If Michael faced no meaningful consequences, what message would that send about the seriousness of discrimination? Accountability without destruction, Alexander thought. Perhaps there was a middle path, one that created meaningful change without destroying lives. Something to consider for the future implementation of the Dignity Protocol. Alexander finally took his rightful seat in 1A as Patricia was relocated to 23F, middle seat economy class. The symbolic reversal wasn't lost on the passengers still filming. "Ladies and gentlemen," came the captain's voice over the intercom. "This is Captain Rodriguez. I want to personally apologize for the delay and the unacceptable behavior you witnessed today. Mr. Reynolds, it's an honor to have you aboard." Amy's live stream had stabilized at 287,000 viewers. The comments section was a river of justice-satisfied emojis and demands for accountability across all industries. Diana Rodriguez took the seat beside Alexander. "It was worse than we anticipated," she said quietly. Alexander nodded. "Which means the problem is deeper than we thought. The protocols aren't working because they're treating symptoms, not causes." "The Dignity Protocol?" Diana asked. "Yes, it's time. Full implementation, no exceptions." Diana had first proposed the Dignity Protocol 2 years earlier, after experiencing discrimination herself during a business trip. Born in Puerto Rico to immigrant parents who worked as hotel housekeeping, she had risen through the ranks of the corporate world through sheer determination and brilliance. The turning point had come during a first-class flight to Tokyo. Despite her executive credentials, the crew had repeatedly served the white businessman next to her while ignoring her requests. When she'd finally complained, the flight attendant had suggested she might be more comfortable in premium economy where people like her usually sat. That experience had catalyzed Diana's development of the Dignity Protocol, a comprehensive framework designed to eliminate discriminatory treatment through a combination of technology training and accountability structures. The core elements included universal verification procedures for all passengers regardless of appearance, body cameras for all customer-facing staff to document interactions, real-time reporting system allowing passengers to flag discriminatory treatment, independent passenger advocates in each hub with direct reporting to executive level, quarterly bias assessments for all employees with mandatory retraining for failures, comprehensive database tracking patterns of discrimination by location, employee and passenger demographics. The pilot implementation in 3 airports had shown promising results, reducing discrimination complaints by 62%. But resistance from middle management, citing costs, technical challenges, and employee privacy concerns, had stalled full deployment. Today's incident would change that. "What about the cost objections?" Diana asked. "The finance team has been fighting the body camera requirement for months." "Let them watch today's live stream," Alexander replied. "Then ask them to calculate the cost of this kind of publicity. I think they'll find $75 million is a bargain compared to the alternative." As the plane reached cruising altitude, Alexander pulled out his laptop and began typing. Within minutes, he'd drafted a company-wide email that would reach all 37,000 Sky Global employees before the aircraft reached New York. The subject line read, "Immediate implementation, zero-tolerance discrimination protocol. Effective immediately. Sky Global Airlines implements the most comprehensive anti-bias program in aviation history," Alexander typed. Today's incident revealed structural failures that end now. He outlined the new policies: the Dignity Protocol, mandatory body cameras for all customer interactions, anonymous bias, reporting through mobile app with 24-hour response guarantee, independent passenger advocate in every hub, quarterly discrimination audits by third-party civil rights organizations, $75 million annual budget for bias prevention and employee training. Alexander looked up from his laptop to address the cabin directly. "I want everyone here to understand what just happened. This wasn't about punishment. This was about prevention." Samuel Walker, the CEO who had questioned the crew's behavior, raised his hand from seat 2C. "Mr. Reynolds, how do you ensure this cultural change actually happens?" "Accountability systems," Alexander replied. "Every employee interaction is now monitored. Every bias complaint triggers immediate investigation, and every violation has real consequences." He showed his laptop screen to nearby passengers. "I'm implementing the 3-strike system. First incident, mandatory retraining. Second incident, 6-month unpaid suspension. Third incident, permanent termination with industry blacklisting." Jessica, who had been quietly crying in the back galley, approached hesitantly. "Mr. Reynolds, I know I don't deserve to ask, but is there any way to earn back your trust?" Alexander studied her for a moment. "Ms. Martinez, you assumed I was lying based on my appearance. You refused to examine evidence. How do you propose to earn back trust?" "I want to become part of the solution," she said, voice trembling. "I want to help train other crew members so they never make my mistakes." "That's actually not a terrible idea," Alexander said thoughtfully. "Personal redemption through education of others. We'll discuss that during your suspension period." Officer Jackson, still on the aircraft documenting the incident, looked up from his report. "Mr. Reynolds, I've seen a lot of discrimination cases. I've never seen someone with your level of power choose education over revenge." "Revenge doesn't create structural change," Alexander replied. "It just creates more resentment. Education creates understanding. Understanding creates lasting transformation." Amy held up her phone, still live streaming. "Mr. Reynolds, people in the comments want to know, was this really a test?" Alexander smiled slightly. I conduct unannounced assessments of our customer experience regularly, but I never expected the results to be this comprehensive. He opened his calendar app showing the pre-scheduled meetings. The emergency board meeting, legal review, and press conference were already planned. I've been documenting discrimination incidents across our system for months. The revelation sent a murmur through the cabin. This hadn't been random. It had been a structured investigation. Today's incident gave me everything I needed to justify the most aggressive anti-discrimination program in corporate history. A teenage passenger called out, "What about other airlines? Will they change too?" "They'll have to," Alexander replied confidently. "Within 48 hours, every major airline will announce similar programs. Nobody wants to be the company that tolerates discrimination after this goes viral." His prediction proved accurate. By the time Flight 447 landed in New York, United Airlines had already issued a statement promising comprehensive bias prevention measures. American Airlines followed an hour later. Alexander's phone buzzed with a text from his media director, "Stock price up 3.2% after your transparency announcement. Investors love the accountability approach." The airline industry was transforming in real time. As Alexander continued working on his laptop, Diana leaned over. "There's something you should know. The woman filming in row 14, Amy Davidson. Her social justice blog has over 3 million followers. This story is going to be everywhere by morning." Alexander nodded. "Good. This isn't just about Sky Global. It's about changing an entire industry's approach to human dignity." Diana studied him for a moment. "You knew something like this would happen eventually, didn't you? That's why you were dressed casually." "I didn't expect the level of hostility," Alexander admitted. "But yes, I've been conducting these evaluations for months. The casual clothing makes people show their true colors." "Your father would be proud," Diana said softly. She'd known Alexander for 20 years, since their early days building the airline from nothing. Alexander touched the pendant beneath his hoodie. "He always said the measure of success isn't how high you climb, but how many people you bring with you." "Speaking of which," Diana nodded toward the back of the plane. "Your new recruit is coming this way." Tyler Wilson, the young flight attendant who'd received the lightest punishment, approached nervously. "Mr. Reynolds, I wanted to apologize personally. I followed the others when I should have followed procedure. It was wrong, and I'm deeply sorry." Alexander assessed the young man. Unlike the others, Tyler had shown discomfort with the situation. There was potential there. "Mr. Wilson, do you know why you're still employed while Mr. Carter is not?" "No, sir." "Because your body language showed doubt. You knew something was wrong even if you didn't speak up." Alexander gestured for Tyler to sit in the empty seat across the aisle. "That hesitation tells me you can learn, that you want to do better." "I do," Sir Tyler said earnestly. "I was raised better than how I acted today." "What made you go along with it?" Alexander asked, genuinely curious. Tyler hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Fear, sir. My mother is going through expensive medical treatments for cancer. I can't afford to lose this job. When I saw how the senior crew was treating you, I was terrified to be the one who disagreed." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But seeing you standing there being treated that way, it reminded me of how my best friend in high school was treated at a restaurant once. I didn't speak up then either. I've regretted it ever since." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "Fear is a powerful motivator, but so is courage. Here's your chance. For the next year, you'll be working directly with our new Dignity Protocol implementation team. You'll help develop training based on today's incident. You'll be the voice saying, 'I was there, I made these mistakes, and here's how to do better.'" Tyler's eyes widened. "You'd trust me with that?" "Trust is earned," Alexander replied. "This is your opportunity to earn it, And Tyler, your mother's medical expenses. Send the bills to my office. We'll take care of them." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. The young man nodded, unable to speak. The young man nodded solemnly. "I won't let you down, sir." As Tyler returned to his position, Patricia approached from economy class. Her designer confidence had been completely stripped away. "Mr. Reynolds, I need you to know I have biracial grandchildren," she said, voice shaking. "I never thought I was racist. I don't understand how I became that person today." Alexander looked at her with something approaching sympathy. "Ms. Whitfield, racism isn't always conscious. Sometimes it's learned assumptions we don't even recognize. That's why the counseling requirement exists. Will you tell Vital Brands what happened? That depends entirely on how seriously you take your rehabilitation," Alexander replied. "Demonstrate real change, and your employer never needs to know the details. Continue the patterns that brought you here, and the video speaks for itself." The conditional mercy was more than Patricia had dared hope for. Alexander returned to his laptop, drafting the press release that would reshape corporate discrimination policies nationwide. Sky Global Airlines announces revolutionary dignity in travel initiative following CEO discrimination incident. The statement was brutally honest about the failures while positioning Sky Global as the industry leader in bias prevention. Every detail of the incident would be public record, but framed as a catalyst for positive change. Officer Rivera finished her documentation and approached Alexander. "Sir, I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I've never seen someone turn a discrimination incident into industry-wide reform in real time. Officer Rivera, change happens when people with power choose to use it responsibly," Alexander replied. "Today, I had the power to create lasting transformation. Tomorrow, that example might inspire others to do the same." As the aircraft descended toward JFK Airport, Alexander reflected on the day's events. One seat dispute had become a corporate revolution. One moment of documented bias had triggered industry-wide policy changes. His phone showed 47 missed calls from reporters, 23 interview requests, and 156 messages from civil rights organizations praising the transparency approach. The teenager Amy, still live streaming to over 300,000 viewers, asked the final question. "Mr. Reynolds, what do you want people to remember about today?" Alexander thought carefully before responding. "I want people to remember that dignity isn't negotiable. Respect isn't earned through wealth or status. It's the birthright of every human being." He looked around the cabin at the faces still processing the dramatic transformation they'd witnessed. "And I want people to remember that real change is possible when we choose accountability over defensiveness, education over revenge, and structural reform over individual punishment." The aircraft touched down in New York as the sun set over Manhattan. Flight 447 had become more than transportation. It had become the catalyst for a civil rights revolution in corporate America. Justice had been served comprehensively and publicly. The real transformation was just beginning. The next morning, Alexander met with Sky Global's executive team to implement the Dignity Protocol. The transformation wouldn't be easy. Technical challenges with body camera implementation, resistance from employee unions concerned about privacy, and the massive logistical undertaking of training 37,000 employees globally would test the company's resolve. But the stakes were clear. Either Sky Global would lead this transformation, or it would be forced to follow as others took the lead. 6 months later, the Dignity Protocol was showing remarkable results. Customer satisfaction ratings had increased by 23%. Employee retention had improved by 14%, and discrimination complaints had fallen by 78%. But the most significant impact was on the lives touched by the protocol. Tyler Wilson had been promoted to Dignity Protocol Training Specialist, traveling the country to share his story and help other employees recognize and confront their biases. Jessica Martinez, after completing her suspension and training, had returned as a frontline trainer, using her own experience to help others avoid similar mistakes. Michael Carter had struggled in the aftermath of his termination. His wife had miscarried their second child, a loss his therapist attributed partly to the stress of their financial situation. After months of unemployment, he'd finally found work at a regional airport in Montana, a significant step down in both position and pay, but the experience had transformed him. He now volunteered at bias awareness workshops, sharing how 10 minutes of unchecked prejudice had cost him everything. Patricia Whitfield had completed her community service at the Urban Civil Rights Coalition. The experience had been transformative. Working with families experiencing housing discrimination, she'd begun to recognize patterns in her own thinking that she'd never before acknowledged. She now spoke regularly at corporate training sessions, her journey from perpetrator to advocate providing a powerful model of accountability and transformation. Alexander's vision had extended beyond Sky Global. The Dignity Protocol had been adopted by 8 major airlines, 4 hotel chains, and a growing number of retail corporations. Congress was considering legislation that would mandate similar protections across all transportation providers. What had begun as one CEO's response to discrimination had become a movement that was reshaping how American businesses understood their responsibilities to customers and employees alike. And at the heart of it all was a simple principle. Dignity isn't a luxury upgrade. It's the basic right of every human being. Have you ever experienced discrimination or witnessed someone being treated unfairly based on their appearance? This isn't just a story. It's a call to action. Each of us has the power to make a difference in our daily lives by speaking up. When we witness discrimination, verifying facts before making assumptions, holding businesses accountable for how they treat all customers, documenting unfair treatment when it occurs, supporting companies that implement meaningful anti-discrimination policies. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together we can create a world where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve, regardless of how they look or what they wear. Remember, sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't anger, it's transformation.